Thank you guys for coming to see my presentation on the impact of smartphones on learning in public school settings. So a big, huge thank you to my professor, Dr. Deborah Nitschke-Shaw, who was paramount in for just helping me along this process. So in this presentation, I want to look at the positives and the negative aspects of smartphones, and to keep an open mind of their impact, and to first give you an idea as to how long they've been in our lives. So they were developed only less than 2 decades ago. In 1992, they were invented by IBM, and what they are in their own thing is that they are simply a phone with an operating system that allows it to use the internet. And so that is technically what a smartphone is. And so who has a smartphone? Well, surprising statistics, 53% of children under 11 have a smartphone. And 84 to 90% of teenagers have a smartphone, which is surprising. 5.5 billion people in less than 2 decades have a smartphone. And so what is the impact of this? Well, we're starting to see this in classrooms. We're starting to see the impact happening in our classrooms. And one of my favorite teaching books, Teaching with the Brain in Mind, by Eric Jensen, he says that classrooms are places filled with distractions. And so oftentimes in the book, he talks about distractions like somebody chewing gum or intercoms or people playing with things. But what we're looking at now is a different type of distraction. So yes, phones may ring, and yes, kids might be on their phones, and you have to stop class to deal with it. But we're seeing a sort of more subtle distraction. We're seeing more anxiety, more depression. Kids are coming to class with less sleep. They are exercising less. They have more sedentary behaviors. And so therefore they are less able to focus. They have more anxiety. They're coming to class with more anxiety. And so in order for kids to learn, they have to be able to feel safe. The second you walk in a room, your brain is immediately assessing the safety of that room. And in order for you to be able to take in information, you need to first know that you're safe. Your brain's going to keep working on ensuring your safety. You're going to keep pushing boundaries. You're going to keep trying to figure out how safe you are. And so to create an environment that's conducive to learning, students need to feel safe. They need to feel comfortable. And so if they are anxious, if they're feeling anxiety, they're not learning. They're not able to take in that information because their brain doesn't feel safe. Their subconscious isn't allowing this process to happen. And so we have seen generalized anxiety disorders increase in the past 15 years from 5% to 30%. And so what happens with anxiety is it releases cortisol in the brain. And what cortisol does is it acts as like a roadblock. So your brain, in order to have thoughts, your brain is sending electrochemical messages down billions of pathways throughout your brain. And what cortisol does is it just sort of acts as a roadblock. It just sort of stops those pathways so that when you're trying to connect two ideas, when you're trying to have an idea, this is not going to be able to happen, or it's going to take longer for it to happen. Your brain has to sort of create little alternative routes in order for your thoughts to happen. And so you're making less progress when you have cortisol in your brain. And so what is our reason for clearing this up, for addressing this problem? Well, why should administration start taking this into consideration? This book that I read in one of my classes at New England College, Ethical Leadership in Decision Making in Education, had a great quote, which I try and implement all the time in my own teaching, that students should be at the center of all decisions made within our school district. So when we make a decision, what is that decision for? Is it for money? Is it for the teachers? Well, every decision we should make should be about, is this going to improve education? Are students going to be happier? Are they going to be learning more? Are they more engaged? And so we're finding that with young minds, the way that their brains work is they have more synapses. So they are able to learn more quickly. They're able to learn more information. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So the human brain is amazing, but a child's human brain is even more amazing. It has more neural pathways. And the older you get, the more pruning, so the more pathways that get removed from the brain. And so if you are engaging with your child, if you're having conversations, then you're creating those pathways. You're making that learning happen, and that child's going to keep those pathways. But if you don't use those pathways, you're going to prune them. They're going to be gone. And so if you have a child that's on screens all the time, then they're going to be really good at interacting with screens, but they're not going to be really good at interacting with other human beings, with making eye contact, with having conversation, because those pathways are going to be pruned. And so it's imperative at a young age to use and develop these pathways. And so if kids are on smartphones, they're going to be really good at being on smartphones. And so we're seeing kids that are really good at being on smartphones, and we're seeing that there's the amount of addiction, amount of kids that are, or people, even adults, but let's focus on kids here, that are addicted to their cell phone. And so why are we addicted to our cell phones? Well, because cell phones are made to be addictive. They are very addictive. The sounds, the messages, the notifications, they make your brain release dopamine. And so when you have your phone on you all the time, you're constantly receiving dopamine. Every time you get a message, dopamine. And dopamine is a hormone, and it makes you feel good. And so you want to feel good. It's good to feel good. And so when you take your phone away, all of a sudden, you're not feeling so good. You're building up a tolerance. You need more dopamine. And so you're going to react. You're going to have volatile reactions potentially, or you're going to have withdrawals to that phone. And so it is because of this, because they make us feel good, that they're so addictive. And so why have I done this study? Why did I do the research questions that I did? Well, my goal, the purpose of this study, is to provide an objective perspective on the level of disruption that we are seeing in classrooms. And why do I want to do this? Because it's difficult to objectively measure distractions. First of all, teachers don't often know when kids are using their phones because they're hiding them. We don't see it. And how do you measure? Do you measure, is it the length of time that the distraction happens? Or is it the length of time that it's in the kid's brain? Is it the number of kids that are being impacted by the distraction? So there's no metric that we use to measure distractions. And so that was the goal of this study, is to sort of to create a metric, to have a greater understanding of how much of an impact smartphones are having on learning. And here are the questions that guided my study. What is the impact that smartphones are having on learning in high school settings? What are the strategies that are currently being used to minimize these distractions? And how are smartphones being used to enhance curriculum? So what are we doing to implement them, to make them a positive experience? Because they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. So how can we use that momentum in a positive direction? And I'm sure you guys know this guy, Mr. Matt Malilla. He was our vice principal a couple years ago, or last year. A couple years ago, I had one of the worst classes I've ever had in my life, and cell phones were very annoying. They were very prevalent, and so I had lots of conversations with our vice principal that year. And one thing that he said that stuck out in my mind is that the greatest problem about our students and their cell phones is they don't understand the real impact or the potential impact. So he was talking about, is it the kids posting pictures of themselves, inappropriate pictures of themselves, or bullying other kids, or the distractions that they're causing, or the addiction. He says that the problem's bigger, and the kids just, they don't have an understanding, and they don't know what they can get themselves into. And so my positionality, please appreciate that I took a moment to be creative and try and look pensively at a phone. And so my position here is that if we don't use this opportunity to teach kids how to use their phones in an appropriate way, in a healthy way, then are we really teaching the whole person? I'm a science teacher. I teach science, but I do more than teach science. I teach kids how to communicate. I teach kids how to be organized. I teach kids how to think. And so if I'm teaching the whole person, am I really teaching the whole person if I just take them away and I put them in a phone hotel and kids don't have access to it? Am I teaching them how to use them in a healthy way? And so some literature, some studies that have already been done. One of these studies, a lot of the studies right now actually are going on in Chinese, in China and in Asian cultures because the rate of addiction is so high over there. But one of the studies that I read about was from Taipei, Taiwan, and they used a self-reporting test of university students from a number of different universities, and they were trying to identify who has or how much depression and how much addiction is out there. And they said that 20% of students were negatively impacted on all three variables. So all three, they used these three variables to define smartphone addiction. They said that 20% of those students in those university populations showed anxiety, depression, and poor sleep quality. It's a high number of students to be addicted. So let's bring this back down to a younger age, more applicable to where we are. We're at middle school in this study. I believe this was in Shanghai. So 2,000 Chinese middle students were given a self-reported study, and the levels in which kids could fall into were tolerance, withdrawal, and full smartphone addiction. And so 1/2 of the students showed no sign of smartphone addiction. That's good. 1/5 of our students, or of those students, showed tolerance. And girls tended to have a higher prevalence of tolerance. 1/6 of the students showed withdrawal, and boys tended to have a higher prevalence of withdrawal. And 1/7 of the students, of middle schoolers, they're not even in high school, it's about 285 students, had full smartphone addiction. And were addicted to their phones before they have an addiction before they even reach high school. And so the good news is there are answers, there are solutions. Another study that I read looked at using meditation to combat smartphone addiction. And so 70 students, once again from Shanghai, were over 13 weeks asked to meditate for a certain amount of time each day and to simply be present and to identify and accept emotions that came while they were using their phone or while they didn't have their phone. And so just by identifying and sitting with that information, saying, oh, I feel anxious now, or I'd like to be on my phone right now. By average, I believe it was week 9, they were spending half of the time that they were spending half of the time on the phone that they were during week 1. And that is, I felt like that was a really positive and good news. So here we are now, the methodology. So what were we doing? What was I doing in this research? So I conducted a research project using a Google quiz form. So I sent surveys out to educators within a high school, public high school. I used both qualitative and quantitative questions. So the quantitative, I used a Likert scale, which is 1 to 10. I used yes and no and do you agree questions. I used qualitative questions to help inform myself, the researcher, on different strategies, positive strategies that are currently being used. And so I can't reveal to you the high school that we were, that the research was conducted, but I can tell you that there's about 3,000 students, that there is the second safest out of 83 districts in New Hampshire, and there's a 95% graduation rate. So there's 3,000 students in the district, I'm sorry. And the high school, in 2019, there was 960 students, there's about 70 educators. And here, this is where one of the limitations of my study exists, is that to achieve the appropriate sample size, I needed 59 teachers, and I only got 46 responses. And so I don't have enough to have a 95% confidence interval, but I believe, get enough information that I can draw some conclusions. Another surprising stat is that the district has grown, or the high school has grown at a rate of 12% over the past 5 years, which is pretty fast. And so here, I've handed out to you guys the results. This is the results of the surveys that I gave out. And so I just want to go over briefly some information that we have here. So if the first question, or one of the questions, was how many years have you been teaching? And so I asked this because I wanted to know what's the level of experience that that I'm working with. If we have new teachers, then perhaps we have classroom management issues. But what we have, and I was surprised to see this, that 42 out of 46 of the teachers that responded had more than 5 years of experience. And so my conclusion to this is that we have an experienced population here. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, I asked the educators to rate the impact of smartphone on the learning in the classroom. And so 1 to 2 would be a positive. They said that enhances education. 9 and 10 said that it's very detrimental to education. And so the conclusion is that in teachers' opinions, smartphones are negatively impacting learning. So no one thought it improved education, but 26 out of the 46 teachers gave it an 8 to 10. And so those are where our greatest numbers lie. How many disruptions during a class? So 1 to 3 teachers said 16, 3 to 5 teachers, 12 teachers said 3 to 5, 12 teachers said 5 to 10, and this was surprising. 3 teachers said 10 plus. Couldn't imagine 10 plus. So the conclusion, half of the teachers out there say that there are 3 to 10 disruptions. And so therefore, smartphones, the conclusion, are causing disruptions in class. Students should only, do you agree or do you disagree? Students should use phones in designated places at designated times only. And so the conclusion, 39 out of 46, so that's a pretty good majority, say that phones should be used or should be regulated by time and place. Teachers agree that there should be some sort of regulation happening. The next agree, students should participate in a course on smartphone addiction. So should we be educating our kids on smartphone addiction? Should they have the knowledge? And so the conclusion is that 39 out of 46 agree. There should be a course. There should be information being disseminated to our students about this information. And a similar question, should we have a smartphone course on etiquette? So how can you use your phone politely? How is it okay to use your phone? When is it a good time? When is it not a good time? And oftentimes, I know that you guys as educators have had this moment when you assume that kids know something. You're like, obviously you know how to put a piece of paper in a folder, and you obviously know how to bring it into class the next day. That's just something that people know how to do. But it's not. We're teachers. We have to teach these things. These things aren't just, they don't just happen. You don't just know them. And so we oftentimes think that kids know the etiquette on how to use the phone, but they don't. Some of them don't know. And so we might have to make this abundantly clear. And so 43 out of 46 teachers agree that we should be teaching kids the etiquette of smartphones. And so here I have 2 qualitative responses here. So how do teachers presently deal with phones in the class? And so I put the answers, the responses, into 3 different categories. And so 15 teachers require smartphones to be kept in backpacks. They only deal with it when it's necessary. 14 teachers say that there are no problems because phones are removed at the beginning of class. They say there are no issues, they don't even have their phones. 10 teachers work to reason with students, to inform them. They believe that they need to use this opportunity to teach kids how to use their phones. So the conclusion, 29 out of 40 teachers do not want to have to deal with phones in their classroom. If a school-wide policy was made, what should it include? So should we implement a policy that everybody has to follow? And I was surprised with this. 14 teachers said there should be no school-wide policy. And so a quote that I went to again and again is that a teacher said, "I do not think school-wide policies work. There are always teachers who do things differently, which erodes the policy." And so this makes sense. Teachers want autonomy, and it's important that teachers can run their class the way that they see fit, because every classroom is different. 10 teachers say that there should be guidelines set by administration but teachers are free to discipline or to deal with it however they want, but they need administrative support. 4 teachers said we need strict enforceable guidelines and more administrator support. 4 said that phones should be removed at the beginning of the class or the day. And 3 said that we should be teaching students how to use their phone. That we should be using this as a teachable moment. Finally, our last bit of research here, how are teachers using their smartphones to enhance learning? So the greatest numbers that I saw were interactive software like Kahoot, for cameras to make movies, for Google to do research, to use as their calculator. So they are being used, and they are being used in positive ways. All right, so the discussion. What are the conclusions? What conclusions did I draw? So my first overarching question was, what is the impact that phones are having on high school education? Well, the conclusion that I drew is that smartphones are having a negative impact on high school education. If we remember the study about Shanghai, the students in middle school having addiction before they even go into high school. If we look at the Likert scale of our teachers, that most of the teachers are saying that there's a negative impact in their classroom, we can draw the conclusion that that kids are being negatively impacted. The second overarching question is, how are smartphones being used to enhance curriculum? And they are. They are a good tool. They are a useful tool. We need to remember that they are a tool. Tools can make life better, but you have to use them the right way. So if you're using them the wrong way, they can hurt you. And so phones are being used in many positive ways to enhance curriculum. So we looked at Kahoot, we looked at Pear Deck, movies. I watched a lot of biology, AP biology TikToks. And then here this is a picture of a lipid membrane or a bilayer, which I drew because it used only the information that I wanted to have. I took a picture of it with my smartphone and I airdropped it to my computer, and it was really easy to do because it's a useful tool. I just took a picture. And so do I want to not have my cell phone in my classroom? No, it's helpful. It helps me. And so the third overarching question, what strategies are being used to minimize inappropriate behaviors? So there are a broad number of methods being used, but most teachers don't want to deal with them. Most teachers just remove them. And so many teachers do feel it is important to teach, to educate. We saw the stat that teachers want kids to have the education. We're teachers. That's our superpower. That's what we do. And so we believe that we can solve problems with education. And so we do want to educate students on smartphone addiction and etiquette, but we just don't want to do it every class, every minute of every class, so that we can't teach our curriculum. And so there's a great quote by Jill Anderson. She wrote an article on this topic, and she said that introducing phones is like another parenting duty. It's like handing a child a book. You have to teach them to read the book. You have to teach kids how to use their cell phone. You have to teach them. It's an ongoing lesson. You can't just give it to them and walk away. And so she also said that what you should do is to keep an ongoing conversation with them. Sort of like the study that we saw about meditation, that if you just identify your feelings, if you can talk about them, then you can use your phone in a healthy way. And so the conclusion is, yes, smartphones are a problem. Teachers don't want to give up their autonomy, so it doesn't make sense to create a school-wide policy with a top-down authority. Education is a powerful tool. And so what we should do is create a class or an educational experience, something that kids can participate in. But we also need to build the community. We need to make it, I love this quote right here, creating a culture where cell phones in class become a social faux pas, kind of like when a phone rings at church. So you have like-minded people. So if we can create that community, if we can create that like-mindedness, then we can pass this message on. And so in order to create buy-in, we would need the educators, the one that are teaching the courses or implementing or enforcing regulations. They would need to be the ones that create the class or the experience so that they can pass on that message. So these are my citations, and thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So you mentioned how you think that students come to class with these ready-made skills. We assume a lot as teachers. Do you think we do the same thing with teacher skills? Are there teachers in the building that don't know how to train our students on how to use a cell phone as a tool in the classroom within their content area?
I think it's a I think I think it's a really good point. Yeah, it's something I didn't think about, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I did say that we have an experienced population, but are they experienced at dealing with phones? Like, there are some people that don't understand technology. There are people that don't want to understand technology.
And so therefore, this is a problem, I don't want to deal with it, but are we giving those teachers the correct tools to be able to deal with it?
Right.
To welcome it, embrace it.
Right. And so with that educational experience that I was talking about, maybe we're not only educating our students, but we're educating our staff as well. Yeah. I really like that point. Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys.